أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وحبيب قلوب العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد، اللهم صل وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المنتجبين الذين أذهب الله عنهم الرجس وطهرهم تطهيرا. صلى الله عليك يا مولاي يا رسول الله، صلى الله عليك وسلم يا مولاي وابن مولاي يا أبا عبد الله، يا رحمة الله الواسعة ويا مصباح الهدى وسفينة النجاة ويا عبرة المؤمنين، غريب مظلوم عطشان شهيد كربلاء، ويا مسلوب العمامة والرداء، ما خاب والله من تمسك بكم، أمن من لجأ والتجأ إليكم. يا ليتنا يا ليتنا كنا معكم سيدي فنفوز فوزا عظيما. قال الله في محكم كتابه الكريم: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم: والله جعل لكم من أنفسكم أزواجا وجعل لكم من أزواجكم بنين وحفدة ورزقكم من الطيبات، أفبالباطل يؤمنون وبنعمة الله هم يكفرون. صدق الله العلي العظيم. Blessing this gathering with a remembrance of Muhammad and Al Muhammad. A second louder salawat for the love of Abi Abdullah al-Hussein. A third salawat for the hastening of the reappearance of our Mawla, Sahib al-Asri wa Zaman. May our souls be sacrificed to him. My dear loved ones, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Marriage is one of the greatest and most important institutions in our faith. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam, he states that an individual who gets married completes half of his faith. It's a beautiful institution between a man and a woman, which allows us to feel respected, loved. It offers us a system of support, of nurturing. Marriage allows us to count on our spouse. It shields us from sins, from zina, from fahsha, wal-'ayadhu billah. And marriage is a very authentic, legitimate institution that has been prescribed by our faith in order to safeguard us. It's a tool, and it's a grand tool. The fact is that not all marriages are successful. Many marriages, especially in the United States, a figure states that almost half of first marriages, they end in divorce. So not all marriages are as successful as others. We have to analyze what makes a successful marriage. And we have to also keep in mind how to prevent a failed marriage. What can we do in order to keep our marriage successful going forward? How can we model our marriage to emulate the divine marriages or honorable marriages that we've been ascribed and we have traditions to in our faith? And we'll get into that topic after a loud salawat. There are many reasons why relationships fail. First and foremost, one of the biggest reasons behind failed relationships, behind failed marriages, is the lack of communication. The inability to find a way to communicate with your spouse. And when you allow problems to arise and you don't take them head on, you don't talk about them immediately, those problems continue to boil and boil until they've become a poisonous, toxic stew that you no longer can handle. You can't deal with that problem anymore. It's so great. Lack of communication also leads people to feel that they are unheard, they are unseen, they are unloved in the relationship. When you have one spouse that wants to communicate and they are completely shut out by the other spouse, that leads for them to feel unsafe within the relationship emotionally. They feel that they don't want to invest their emotions going forward. Why should I put my love and my hard work and my dedication into this marriage when maybe in 5 years and 10 years these problems are going to continue to occur and there is no solution? Managing those problems comes with direct communication. And you have to set ground rules for communication, my dear loved ones. You have to have a way of communicating. You have to have boundaries that you set that are healthy boundaries. First and foremost, you have to understand how to communicate with one another. The boundary of respect, the barrier of respect, is the most important thing when communicating with your spouse. It cannot be broken. It's like a hijab. It's like a sitr. If that hijab is penetrated, then that respect, that barrier of respect is gone. Anything after that is plausible. When there's a barrier of respect, you speak to each other, you don't raise your voice on each other. You don't curse each other. You don't, wal-'ayadu billah, curse each other's families. Because when verbal abuse begins, when the communication begins to become disrespectful, the avenue opens to other forms of harassment, physical harassment as well. Everyone has a boiling point. If you reach that specific boiling point, who knows what can occur? Having clear communication, accurate communication, and respectful communication, that is something essential. The lack of that is one of the main problems behind unsuccessful relationships, unsuccessful marriages, my dear loved ones. Those problems, when they go unresolved, it's like when you have an ailment. Let's say you have high blood pressure or you have cholesterol. You have high cholesterol. And you go to the doctor and the doctor tells you have to exercise, you have to diet, you have to take these medications, or else it's going to get worse. And you totally disregard that. You say, let's talk about this later. Let's put this away. Let's talk about it later. Let's change the subject. After a few months, you come back and you have clogged arteries. You have to get an operation. You have to get a surgery because you let that ailment continue to occur within your body. The lack of communication, when you have problems occurring in your marriage, it's the same exact way. They're ailments. If you don't figure out how to solve them with communication, they continue to occur until they get too great, to where they're unsolved, my dear loved ones. This is important to keep in mind. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Another problem, another issue that causes failed relationships, failed marriages, is the lack of intimacy. You're afraid to be emotional with your spouse. You're afraid to tell them really how you truly feel, right? You're afraid to open up. And that can be due to lack of self-esteem, fear of rejection, fear of abandonment. There are many reasons why you're afraid to become more intimate and more open with your spouse, emotional with your spouse. You see, if your spouse feels like you might reject them because maybe you have in the past, you have not validated their emotions, their feelings, when they did open up, that creates a lack of intimacy. When your spouse comes to you, for example, your wife, you're about to go on a business trip, and your wife, she might get emotional. She might feel sad. She might tell you, you know what, I'm going to miss you a lot. This is going to be tough. It's challenging for me. It's the first time you're going to be away. And you just give her a pat on the back and say, it's all good, like she's one of your buddies. How is she going to feel? Next time you leave, she's not even going to care. You're going to have a lunchbox packed, ready to go, and she's just going to say, Assalamu alaikum, that's it. You're going to leave. That's the lack of intimacy, because that fear of being rejected again, or having those feelings unvalidated, that will create a boundary which causes fear and resentment for being intimate, being emotionally intimate. And it's not only in young women, it's not only in ladies. Men can have a fear of being intimate too, in sharing their emotions and sharing how they feel with their spouse. That's an important part to being open with your spouse and having a successful relationship and marriage, is to be intimate. Show your emotions. Show them with your actions and with your words. If your wife is doing great around the house, she's taking good care of the children, she's working hard, take her out. Make her feel like she's valued. Have some intimate time with her, one-on-one time with her. Buy her a small gift, whatever it may be. Even words, they mean a lot. That makes them feel valued. Be intimate with your spouse. That lack of intimacy causes a rift. Another problem that might arise, and sometimes it's a problem, I see it as actually a strength in certain marriages, but that's cultural differences. In the United States, we see marriages from different backgrounds, multi-ethnic families, interracial marriages, and those marriages, they might have certain issues that occur because of culture, right? Not because of religion, because Islam itself has no culture, has no ethnicity, has no skin color or background. It's Islam, it's pure, it's like water. Once you add that cultural flavor, those food coloring drops, that water becomes tainted. It becomes impure. And I'm not telling you to completely eradicate culture from your lives. No, that's not logical. But you need to draw a line. If you have your spouse is from another culture, you're from a different culture, you have to find a medium. You have to find a in order where a spouse who feels that they're competing to have one culture dominant within the household. An Iraqi man marries a Pakistani lady. He feels the need that his children have to grow up completely 100% Iraqi. No, that's not logical. When it comes time for Eid, for example, you go and visit your families, you want to do things in one ethnic way or in one specific cultural way. Sure, but you should also plan for the next year to be a different way, and you should be equal. You should be understanding. It should be a total understanding between the two spouses that, yes, we have cultural differences, but they can be strengths to our children. Imagine a child growing up knowing 4 or 5 languages. Is that not beautiful? That's a strength. That's something that they can use in their professional life, in their interaction with the rest of society. That's a strength. That's not a weakness to be part of a multi-ethnic household, my dear loved ones. But if the division arises and we don't work towards fixing it, it can be another reason why relationships break and fall apart. People as they grow older, sometimes they grow apart. Spouses sometimes grow apart. They have different interests. They start to look towards different goals. If, let's say, a young lady, she's completely interested in professional development, right? She gets a lot of books from the library. She goes to the library and she reads about professional development, how to get that job she's really been wanting, how to increase the references on her resume, for example, how to build the perfect resume. And on the other hand, you have her husband, which is really into sports. He looks into the statistics, he plays sports, he watches sports in his free time. And this is not a problem, that they have differences and different likes and interests, if they find time to still be intimate with one another, which is what I alluded to earlier. If you have that time to have similarities and share interests together, that's important. But if you start to grow apart and you totally disregard the other person's interests and likes and what they care about, that creates a rift. Then you're going to be living in two totally different planets, my dear loved ones. Another big thing is goals. Having goals is something important in life. A person without goals is a person that doesn't have a path in life. There's a quote that says, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. Everyone's heard that quote. And it's very true. You have to have a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan. You have to have a long-term outlook. Although we don't know what will happen tomorrow, life is short. Israel can come knocking at our door tonight and take our life. But we have to plan as if we live in the long term. Right? And those goals, they can be completely different for spouses. You can see that their goals might be even diverging, right? You have a young lady who really she's infatuated and she's really in love with her professional development. She loves her career. She's pursuing a strong career. She studies hard and she wants to get into the workforce. And on the other hand, her husband, he's a professional as well. He's putting food on the table. They're comfortable. But he's more inclined towards the household. He wants the household, the children to be mu'mineen and mu'minat. That's where his goals are. He wants to raise a beautiful, healthy, religious family. And he's willing to sacrifice some of his professional accolades, some of his professional development for that reason, but she might not be. Those are diverging goals. Those can cause a rift within a relationship. And we have to acknowledge that. We have to speak about those issues that arise with clear communication, my dear loved ones. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Sometimes you see there's religious differences in couples. When they're young, they get to know each other. They're not at a mature stage in their religious, spiritual development, right? And one of the spouses, let's say, the young lady, she becomes more attached to her faith. She wants to become more religious. She attends the majalis more often. She wants to go to Hajj. She wants to go to ziyarah. She stops listening to music. She betters her hijab. She's taking all the steps to become more of a mu'minah. On the other hand, her husband is still the way he is when he met her. And he starts to tell her, you know what? Last month you were listening to music and now music is a problem. What changed? Now you're a saint. Now all these things are different and I'm doing everything incorrectly. That can cause a major problem. When their religious maturity and their religious levels are different, they're not at that same level, it causes a problem. In that case, you need to allow your spouse to have room to grow with you. You can't force feed them. You can't expect them to change overnight, because when you met them, you knew who they were. You know who they were. You can't expect them to change overnight. That being said, if it comes to a point in time where it's months, it's a year, it's over a year, and there's no changes, there needs to be a serious conversation, a very serious conversation. Because at the end of the day, our deen, our religion, That is the most important part of our identity, of our fabric. That is what allows us to have success in the akhirah. We can't only be caught up on the success of this world and this dunya, my dear loved ones. And one of the most major problems that causes failed relationships, obviously, is abuse. Physical, emotional, verbal abuse. And abuse can get very out of hand quickly. As I stated earlier, that barrier of respect, if that barrier of respect is broken, and there's harassment, there's name calling, that level of disrespect can quickly lead to abuse, continued abuse. And if you're facing abuse within a relationship and you feel like there's really no outlet, there's no way out, then you have to get out of that relationship. There's nothing much that you can do. If there's no source, there's no hope, my dear loved ones. And we hope that none of us in this majlis are dealing with something like that, but if someone is, you have to very much consider your situation. See the resources you have in your community. Figure out what you can do. That's very important for the sake of your own well-being, your children's well-being. My dear loved ones, we have to understand how we can build and structure a successful marriage, how we can prevent these issues and these problems from occurring. The most important thing is when you first get married or before you find your spouse, your potential spouse, and when you found them, you go to counseling, you go to marriage counseling, and you go to therapists that are professionals in speaking to you about how it is that you have different ways of communicating, how it is that you go about problems and solutions, how it is that you strategize about conflict resolution. Problems don't have to arise. It might sound weird. Why do I have to go to a therapist before I get married? I just met my wife and I asked her to come with me to go and attend a therapy session. That's a little weird. No, it's not. Absolutely not. Because the medical professionals in this room can tell you preventing something is easier than treating it after it occurs. You have to prevent the problem before it occurs. You have to set up a safeguard. You have to set boundaries. So when you go to a licensed professional, someone who is trained in that field, they can tell you, well, you have two different forms of communicating. This individual communicates, with more emotion. They're more emotionally invested in the relationship. They use less of their logic. And this person, on the other hand, they're fact-based, right? They think logically. And that's sometimes divergent, but it could be a strength if you figure out how to communicate with one another. It's important to also involve religious leaders, ulama, people in the community that you respect, you trust. And you go to counselors and therapists it would be preferred to attend counseling sessions by professionals that are Muslims. Why? Because they keep in mind the roles of a wife and a husband within the religion of Islam. If you go to a person that has a degree from Harvard or Yale or Stanford, yeah, they're smart, but they might have absolutely no clue how a Muslim household operates. They might not know anything about ethnic diversity or how a specific community does things. You want to go to people you trust within your community. Find those Muslim individuals that you can trust, that keep the best interest in mind when it comes to both spouses. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. I don't know if you guys are getting bored or tired. Should I keep going or should I stop? Okay. Sallu ala Muhammad. Ya Ali. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. There was a research study published by the National Library of Medicine, and it was interesting to me when I read it because It followed a group of researchers that were actually based in Iran, a Muslim country. So I was intrigued. I wanted to learn more about it. And as I read about what was going on in the research study, it was a research study about successful marriages and what it took to have a successful marriage in that community, in an Islamic country. So they asked respondents, they had a large sample, and they asked respondents what it meant to have a successful marriage. And they took people within the community that were elders, that had many years under their belt of experience, and they had successful marriages. They were happy in their life. So they asked them multiple questions, many questions. There was a survey done. And some of the things that stood out to me, these people, they said that one of the most important things was that they were allowed to have an ease in their marriage. The process was not difficult. So the parents of the spouses, they didn't put many regulations and requirements. They didn't ask for, crazy amounts of dowry. They didn't ask for specific requirements that caused one side of the marriage to feel burdened. And we see this in many communities. A young man just starting his professional career, he goes to ask a young lady's hand in marriage, and the families sit down, the youth sit down, they get to know each other, they hit it off, everything's going well, and then he's astounded by a crazy amount of dowry, mahar. That's not something that's part of our faith. That's not something that's part of our tradition, my dear loved ones. Your daughter's value is not based on her dowry. She's not a piece of objects, right? She's not a package where you're selling. This is not something you're marketing. Fatima al-Zahra alayha salam, she's the beacon, she's the symbol, she's the icon for all of our ladies to follow. And she had a very humble dowry, a humble mahar. Mahar as-sunnah. Go look into that mahar. Go read about that mahar. We can't expect for a young man who's just starting out to be able to furnish a large amount, a sum of money that is perhaps illogical to expect of him. That creates a rift, a division within that marriage. Furthermore, they said an important thing was to have similar values, similar religious and moral values. When they talked to each other and they got to know each other, they asked each other, what level of religiosity are you at? If you're getting to know a young lady and she's memorized the Quran from cover to cover and you're still having trouble praying every day, that's not probably the ideal situation for you, brother. There's going to be problems that arise in that relationship, in that marriage. You can't think that, I'll quickly catch up. She's going to be my coach or my mentor in religion. That's not really how it works. You have to fill that gap in order to be on a similar level of religiosity in order to proceed successfully. Or else there will be feelings of judgment. There's going to be feelings of not being enough, maybe. These are real things that people deal with that cause unsuccessful relationships. A thing that really you need to focus on and figure out before you get married is sitting down with your spouse and figuring out your interests and your goals in life. When it comes, so you get the religious aspect out of the way, then you talk about your professional goals, what you want to do going on in your career, what you want to do going on in your professional life. If you meet someone, a young man, and he's in medical school and he tells you, I'm studying to become a physician. I'm going to be on call most of my life. I'm going to be in and out of the house, especially the first few formidable years of our marriage. I might not be around as much. You have to consider that. Don't think that we'll get married and we'll see how it goes. Let's get married. We've hit it off. We've talked for a few weeks, a month, whatever it may be, even a couple of months. It's going to get better. He'll spend more time at... No. You have to hear that out. You have to take that into consideration. In the same way, you have to be honest as well. If you're studying and you're getting a degree as a young lady, and after marriage you don't want to pursue a professional career, you don't want to be employed, you want to work, you want to, build the home, you want to be a housewife, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. You have to be honest about that. You have to say, this is my goal in life, this is what I want to do, this is what I want to dedicate myself towards. It's important to know those things before getting into a situation, then thinking as time goes on, we'll get closer, we'll build a family, and we'll mesh together. That's not what happens. When you're faced with stress, with challenges, especially when it comes to economic instability, raising kids, having a busy schedule, if you aren't able to communicate effectively, that stress will get to you, and it'll cause those small differences and those small rifts to increase and get larger and be harder to solve. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And an important thing is to have a support network. Your family and your friends have to support you when you have problems in your marriage. And really the most important point in this is for the parents or the family members not to take a side. They can't get emotionally involved and have a bias, which is difficult, it's challenging, but it's important to stand on the side of haqq, on the side of what's correct. If your daughter is having a shortcoming in her marriage and you're approached by her spouse, by her husband, and he comes to you and he opens up and he tells you that, you can't just put that aside and say, you know what, it'll get better. No, she's a great girl. You're misunderstanding her, whatever it may be, just because she's your daughter. You're afraid what the community might say. You're afraid what people might view you as, judge you as. No. If you want the best for your daughter, you want her to have a successful relationship and a successful marriage, you sit her down and you tell her, look, this is something that's going on in your marriage. This is something you need to deal with. This is something you need to fix going forward, especially if you want to have children. Those support networks have to be built on trust and on not adding fuel to the fire, not adding spices, not going out into the community and telling people, oh, well, as a spouse, you have friends and you go out and tell them, I'm facing this in my marriage and that in my marriage, and then it becomes a point of gossip for the community. Oh, do you know what her wife did to her? This. Do you know what her husband did to her? This, that, and the other. This is not what a healthy support network is. You have to build healthy support networks built on assisting both sides of that marriage. How is it that we can model our relationship valuably, correctly, on a good, strong foundation? We'll get into that after a loud salawat. The husband and the wife both need to treat each other with altruism, with ithar. Altruism is a characteristic of people who put others before themselves. You act selflessly. So it's not that you, and we alluded to this in past lectures, you can't expect to divide everything right down the middle, equally. The child spends 4 hours with her mom and 4 hours with her dad, no matter what. No matter how busy the schedule is, no matter what's going on. That's not ithar. That's not altruism. That's not true love. You have to be able to take a moment to say, if you need help, I'll help you out. If I'm not busy and you're really struggling, it doesn't matter if I have to stand and wash dishes or I have to mop or I have to clean. It's not less manly, trust me. There's a story of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He walks into the house of Fatimah al-Zahra and Amir al-Mu'mineen. He sees that they're both milling wheat. They're breaking down the wheat to make bread, to make food. He walks in, Assalamu alaikum, alaikum assalam. He says, who's more tired amongst you? And you have to keep in mind, a father-in-law walking into a home, he's not automatically saying, my dear daughter, have a seat. You know, you've been working all day, let me help you out. He asks, who is more tired? He's having equity in that decision. Amir al-Mu'mineen immediately says, oh Rasulullah, Fatima is more tired. He has altruism, he has ithar. Although Amir al-Mu'mineen, he would work hard labor, physical labor, he would dig wells, he would work in palm orchards. He was probably tired himself, but that ithar, that selflessness, allowed himself to put Fatima al-Zahra before him. You see, is there a manlier man than Amir al-Mu'mineen? Can you give me an example of someone more brave, someone who defines manhood and pride and honor more than Ali ibn Abi Talib? No. And he stood and he milled wheat, he made bread. And some of us will freak out if we have to wash one dish. Oh, that's not manly. Especially if you have family over or cousins or friends and they see you in the dish, they see you doing the dishes. Right? That WhatsApp group is going to be roasting you all day. Oh, this guy was doing dishes. It doesn't matter though. You have to have altruism, my dear loved ones. Ithar. Putting yourself before your spouse, that's important. And it's not only for the man who has to do that. Young ladies have to keep that in mind too. If your husband deals with a very busy schedule, he's working odd hours of night, he's working physical labor, and he comes home and he's tired, and he wants a warm meal, he wants the house to look good, he wants the children to be fed and clothed. That's not something that's unusual, my dear loved ones. Yes, it's not that he renders you to a maid, no, but you have to understand that. You have to see where he's coming from. Put him before yourself. Have that ithar. Have that love in your heart. You have to share the responsibilities in the household, my dear loved ones. If you have time and you're sitting around and you have nothing better to do, get up and help. Get up and help. You have to share the responsibilities. One day, Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, he comes home after a long day of work, of labor. And he sees Fatima al-Zahra, she's working, she's cooking, she's helping the kids, she's cleaning the home. And immediately he goes and he asks her, how can I help you? What is it that I can do to help you? So she tells him, you can help me clean the lentils. Adas, dal. She says, can you help me clean this? He starts sifting it, he cleans it. Rasulullah walks in, he takes a look at what's going on and he tells him, Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib, he tells him, do you know the reward of what you're doing right now? Do you know the reward of alleviating stress, physical burden from your wife? He says, a man who helps his wife when she's struggling, when she's having trouble meeting the responsibilities of the household, for each hair within his body, he is rewarded for 1 year of worship. Isn't that a reward we want? Isn't that a reward that we would pursue? People spend hours, years in research in how to become a mu'min. This is one pathway, my dear loved ones, of becoming a true mu'min, a true believer, having great, immense rewards. One important aspect of a marriage is not being afraid to show your emotions, not being afraid to tell your spouse how you truly feel, not being afraid to be vulnerable. That makes value within your relationship. One day, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, he tells Amir al-Mu'mineen, there's a mission. Tomorrow, we have to leave after Fajr. We have to go to Wadi al-Raml. Wadi al-Raml, there's going to be combat. There will be danger. Prepare your armor, prepare your sword. Dathul fiqar, we're going to battle. So he's sitting at night, he's sharpening his sword, he's polishing his armor. Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam, she comes and she sees Amir al-Mu'mineen. She begins crying. She becomes emotional. She feels sad. She's afraid to lose Ali ibn Abi Talib. And she shows that emotion. She goes to her father, Rasulullah. She tells him, "Oh father, I'm scared. I'm scared I'll lose my husband. I'm scared danger is going to occur." He tells her, "Don't worry, my dear loved one. Nothing will happen to Amir al-Mu'mineen." She shows that emotion. She's not afraid to cry, to say, "I'll miss you. When you leave, I'll be scared." Our sisters have to keep this in mind. Show your husband. You're emotional. You're fragile. This is something that creates a valuable woman, a high value woman. My dear loved ones. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Can you turn off the lights? Could someone turn? Yeah, thank you. Ahsantum. On the day of Ashura, Sayyidah Zainab alayha salam, she looks at the bodies that are coming into the tent of the shuhada. She sees the bodies of Bani Hashim. She sees the bodies of these youth. All of them, they're like flowers that have been plucked too early. The lifeless bodies she continues to see. And she's looking eagerly, anxiously. She wants to see the bodies of her sons, Aun and Muhammad. And she's eager, she's looking. After a while, she sees they've not arrived. She calls her sons. She tells them, "Aun, Muhammad, come." They come to the tent of a Sayyidah Zainab. "Assalamu alayki ya ummah, ya Zainab. What is it that you want from us?" She tells them, "How is it that your uncle Hussein alayhi salam, he's standing in front of the enemies, he's saying, 'Hal min nasirin yansuruna,' and you're standing here, you're still alive, you're still breathing? That's not going to fly." She tells them, "Go out to the battlefield. You have to battle. Your time has come." They look at her and they tell her, "Oh mother, our dear mother, we've been begging our uncle Hussein from dawn to let us to go to battle, and he's been denying us time and time again. Maybe you can talk to him. You can convince him." She calls Aba Abdullah to her tent. He walks into the tent of Zainab. "Assalamu alayki ya Zainab." She tells him, "Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. Ya baqiyata abi wa ummi wa ahli." When she sees Aba Abdullah, she sees the nur of Ali ibn Abi Talib. She smells that fragrance of Rasulullah. She's reminded of her grandfather. She tells him, "Aba Abdullah, is there something wrong with my boys? Is there something wrong that they've done that you won't allow them to go out to the battlefield?" He tells her, "Zainab, I can't allow them to die. I can't allow you to deal with that pain and that suffering. You don't want to go through that." She tells him, "Aba Abdullah, how can I answer our mother Fatima al-Zahra on the day of judgment if Ali al-Akbar is gone, if Qasim is gone, and my sons Aun and Muhammad are still alive? What can I answer? How can I keep my head held up high in front of her?" Allahu Akbar. Aba Abdullah, he tells them, "It's your time to go to the battlefield. Prepare yourself." He kisses them, he hugs them, he takes them to their horses. They go out to their horses. And Sayyidah Zainab, during battle, she would watch all the Ansar, all the Bani Hashim. She would pray for them outside of her tent. But when it came time for her sons, she stayed inside the tent. She didn't want them to see her crying. She didn't want Aba Abdullah to see her crying. They go out to the battlefield. Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas is filled with joy. He's filled with pride. He's the one who taught them to fight. They go out and they push back the enemies away from the camp of Aba Abdullah. Hundreds of men are killed, are slain by these brothers. When Aun needs help, Muhammad comes to his rescue. When Muhammad needs help, Aun comes to his rescue. The enemies see this, they divide the brothers. The brothers are surrounded by all angles. They are attacked by spears. They are attacked by arrows. They are cut to pieces. Ayn al-munadi wa awnah wa muhammada. Allahu Akbar. They call their uncle Hussein during their last breaths. They say, Ya Aba Abdullah, adrikna. He runs towards them. He goes towards them. He holds them. They tell him, Oh Aba Abdullah, please tell our mother we fought valiantly. Tell her that she can hold her head up high. We didn't go towards the Furat. We didn't go in search of water. We died thirsty. Allahu Akbar. Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا آل محمد أي منقلب ينقلبون والعاقبة للمتقين. Please raise your hands in dua. اللهم نسألك وندعوك باسمك العظيم الأعظم الأعز الأجل الأكرم يا Allah. Oh Allah, those who are dealing with cancer, with diabetes, with mental illnesses, physical illnesses, Allah give them complete shifa. Oh Allah, grant us the continued khidmah of Aba Abdullah. Oh Allah, give us the shafa'ah of Aba Abdullah. Oh Allah, grant us the ziyarah of Aba Abdullah. Please rise to recite Dua al-Faraj for the hastening of the appearance of our Mawla. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma kun li waliyika al-Hujjat ibn al-Hasan. Salawatuka alayhi wa ala aba'ih. في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. صلوات.
ماتم حسين.